In this video, I'm going to show you how to set up a disconnected lookup using Task Factory. Just like the connected lookup, you have to have a cache that is filled up using the Lookup Cache Transform, and you have to have an Advanced Lookup Cache Connection Manager. In this case, we have a connection manager that has six columns of data, and we have two outputs. Just like the connected lookup, you can only retrieve data from columns that are defined as outputs. So in this case we have two. One is the product name and the second is standard cost. Now keep in mind, we want to remember this, that product name is the first output column defined. The second thing you can do is, or the second thing you have to keep in mind, is the input parameters. Now input parameters are important because when we call lookup data, which is the function to execute the disconnected lookup, you have to pass in the values for each input parameter. So remember that we have two input parameters, product alternate key param and order date param. So let's take a look at how we use this. Any expression-based component that we have in Task Factory, like the advanced derived column, the aggregator, the conditional split, and the filter rows, can be used to execute disconnected lookups. So what we're going to do is take a look at both functions that can be used to execute a disconnected lookup, and those are lookup data and lookup data by column. So let's take a look at lookup data. Now the way that lookup data works, is I'm going to expand this a little bit, is that you have to call lookup data, which is the function name. You're going to pass in the Advanced Cache Connection Manager, and you can see down here that's the name of our Cache Connection Manager. And if you come over to the connections over here on the left hand side, you can see here's our product cache, which is an Advanced Lookup Cache. So that is the first parameter. Now lookup data, what you have to do with these parameters here are, these are the input parameters. Now this is a parameter array, meaning that you can pass in as many parameters here as there are input parameters. So remember, in our lookup cache we had two input parameters, and that was the product alternate key and the order date. So we can see here that we're passing in the column from our source, which is, here's all the columns right here, the product alternate key and the full date. So when this executes, what's going to happen is it's going to call the cache connection manager. It's going to pass in the value of product alternate key from our source and full date alternate key from our source, and passes into the input parameters. Okay, so that's how you use lookup data. Now lookup data, what it does is it retrieves the first output column in the cache. So remember, I told you to remember that product name was the first input parameter in our cache. So in this case, what it's going to do is pull product name back, and you can see when we look at this, that is what we're going to pull here. Now there's a second function called lookup data by column, and what this allows you to do is ignore the first one if you want to ignore it, and just really call any output column that you want. Whether it's the first one or the last one, you can pass in what column that you want to retrieve from the output. And again, the columns that precede, or that are after the first two parameters, again, which are the connection manager and the column name, is a param array of columns or of parameters that are passed in that match up to the input parameters in our cache connection manager. So again, product alternate key and order date param are what we're passing these into. So again, in this case, you can pull back whatever column that you want, and then in the lookup data you are simply pulling the first column set up as an output. So let's go ahead and take a look at how this runs. And we're going to see that, yep, and that you're going to get that every once in a while. Let me warn you about that. You're going to get that every once in a while. That even though there's no warning, where you could potentially get a warning because of the way that the lookup data column validates. So we're going to click OK, and you can just say yes, that's okay. All right, so let's go ahead and run this and take a look. All right, so we stopped at our breakpoint, and now we're going to hit this here. Alright, so we can take a look over here, and we can see that the data is being pulled back. Now you can see that a couple of them came back as null, and so what happens if the lookup fails, what happens is you just get null data back. There's no failure or anything like that. So depending on how you set up your connection manager, but either way, you can see here that it's pulling back the data that we're asking it to pull back.